The church was silent, save for the faint rustle of Clara's wedding dress as she shifted at the altar. Ethan's heart thundered, his hand gripping the tablet like a lifeline, its screen glowing with a single QR code that could unravel everything. In 3 seconds, he'd decide whether to shatter his world or bury the truth forever. Ethan Parker stood at the altar of St. Mary's, a quaint church in the heart of Willow Creek, Pennsylvania. The pews were filled with faces he'd known his whole life, neighbors, cousins, old high school teachers, all beaming with the kind of small-town pride that weddings in these parts always stirred. Clara, his fiancée, stood beside him, radiant in white, her auburn hair catching the light filtering through the stained glass windows. She was everything anyone could want, kind, whip-smart, and the daughter of James Whitaker, Willow Creek's most respected pastor. To the world, they were the perfect couple. To Ethan, they were a carefully constructed lie. He'd known he was gay since he was 13, sneaking glances at boys in gym class while pretending to fumble with his shoelaces. Growing up under James's roof, though, meant hiding who he was. James, with his fire and brimstone sermons, had made it clear love was between a man and a woman, and anything else was a sin. Ethan had spent years suffocating under that weight, crafting a version of himself that could survive in Willow Creek. He'd dated Clara for 3 years, proposed last spring, and played the part of the dutiful son-in-law-to-be. But the truth clawed at him, and the QR code on his tablet held the key to setting it free. 6 months ago, Ethan had stumbled across something that changed everything. Late one night, unable to sleep, he'd borrowed James's old laptop to check some wedding vendor emails. The laptop was ancient, a relic from James's early days as a pastor, and Ethan hadn't expected to find anything beyond sermon drafts and church budgets. But there, buried in a folder labeled Old Sermons, was a file named correspondence_1998. Curiosity got the better of him. He clicked. The file contained email hundreds of them between James and a man named Michael. They weren't sermons. They were love letters, raw and aching, written by a younger James to a man he'd met during a theology conference in Philadelphia. The words were tender, desperate, filled with promises of a life they could never have. I dream of a world where I can hold your hand in the open, James had written. Ethan's stomach churned as he read, the hypocrisy sinking in. His father, the man who'd preached against people like him, had been in love with a man. Ethan didn't confront James. Not then. He copied the emails to a USB drive and sat on them, wrestling with what to do. Part of him wanted to scream, to shove the truth in James's face and watch him crumble. But another part, the part that still loved the man who'd raised him, hesitated. James wasn't just his father. He was Willow Creek's moral compass. Exposing him would tear the town apart. Then there was Clara. Ethan had always cared for her, even if it wasn't the love she deserved. She was his best friend, the one who'd laughed with him over late-night milkshakes at the diner, who'd helped him pick out his first suit for prom. But Clara had secrets too. Ethan had seen the way her eyes lingered on women at the coffee shop, the way her voice softened when she talked about her college roommate, Lena. He'd never pushed her to admit it, but he knew Clara was bisexual, and she was as trapped in Willow Creek's expectations as he was. The wedding was Clara's idea. It's what people expect, she'd said one night, her voice barely above a whisper. We'll be safe together. Ethan had agreed, thinking maybe they could build a life on mutual understanding, even if it wasn't love. But the closer the wedding got, the heavier the lie became. He couldn't marry her. Not like this. That's when he'd come up with the QR code. It was a simple plan, born out of desperation. He'd uploaded the emails, James's, and a few of Clara's old texts to Lena that he'd found on her Finito, a private website. The QR code linked to it. If he showed it today, during the ceremony, everyone in the church would see the truth. His father's hypocrisy, Clara's hidden heart, his own buried identity. It would be chaos, but it would be honest. The organ began to play, a soft prelude to the vows. Ethan's pulse raced. Clara's hand brushed his, and he caught her eye. She looked nervous, her smile faltering. Did she sense what was coming? Across the altar, James stood tall, his face a mask of paternal pride. Ethan's grip tightened on the tablet. The moment was now. Dearly beloved, James began, his voice booming through the church. Ethan's mind raced. He could stop this. He could let the ceremony go on, marry Clara, and keep the secrets buried. Or he could scan the QR code on the projector screen behind them, let the truth spill out, and face whatever came next. He thought of Michael, the man James had loved and left behind. He thought of Lena, the woman Clara still texted in secret. He thought of himself, 20 years from now, living a life that wasn't his. The tablet felt heavier than ever. Ethan, Clara whispered, her voice trembling. The congregation leaned forward, waiting for his vows. His thumb hovered over the screen. Ethan's thumb froze above the tablet, the QR code glowing like a beacon of truth and destruction. The church's silence pressed against him, every eye fixed on his hesitation. Clara's whisper, Ethan, cut through the haze, her green eyes searching his for answers he wasn't ready to give. He forced a smile, buying time. Just nerves, he muttered, loud enough for the front row to hear. A few guests chuckled, assuming it was wedding jitters. But Clara's grip on his hand tightened, her knuckles white against the bouquet of lilies. She knew him too well. Something was wrong. Ethan glanced at the projector screen behind them, blank for now, meant for a slideshow of their childhood photos later. The tech setup was his idea, a last-minute addition he'd pitched to James as a modern touch. James, ever the traditionalist, had grumbled but agreed. Now, that screen was Ethan's weapon if he had the courage to use it. He thought back to the night he'd found Clara's texts to Lena. They were old, from her senior year of college, but raw with longing. I wish I could tell the world about you, Clara had written. But Willow Creek would never understand. Ethan had found them by accident, syncing her phone to the laptop for wedding music playlists. He hadn't meant to snoop, but the notification popped up, and curiosity won. Those texts were the first crack in their facade, proof that Clara was living a half-life too. He'd confronted her gently, a month ago, over coffee at their favorite diner. Clara, are you sure about this? About us? He'd asked, stirring his latte to avoid her eyes. She'd gone quiet, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. It's easier this way, she'd said finally. You get it, don't you? We can't be who we are. Not here. Her words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were too true. Willow Creek, with its white picket fences and Sunday sermons, didn't leave room for people like them. But Ethan wasn't so sure anymore. The QR code wasn't just about exposing James's hypocrisy or Clara's secrets, it was about freeing himself. He'd spent years hiding, shrinking himself to fit the mold of the perfect son, the perfect fiancé. The weight of it was crushing him, and this moment, this wedding, was his last chance to break free. James cleared his throat, pulling Ethan back to the present. Ethan, son, it's time for your vows, he said, his tone warm but edged with impatience. The congregation shifted, eager for the moment they'd all come to see. Ethan's mouth went dry. He glanced at Clara, her face pale, her eyes pleading for him to go through with it. He looked at James, standing there like a pillar of righteousness, oblivious to the storm brewing in his son's heart. "Hi," Ethan started, his voice cracking. He lifted the tablet slightly, the QR code still glowing. One tap, and the projector would light up with the website he'd built. The emails. The texts. The truth about all three of them. His finger hovered, trembling. He remembered the last time he'd seen Michael's name mentioned. It was a year ago, at a church fundraiser. An older man, maybe in his 60s, had approached James after the event, his face lined with quiet grief. "James," he'd said softly, "it's been a long time." James had frozen, his smile vanishing, before muttering something about needing to check on the donations. Ethan hadn't thought much of it then, but now he knew that was Michael, the man his father had loved and abandoned. The memory fueled him. He couldn't let another 20 years pass in silence. He couldn't let Clara marry him, knowing she loved someone else. He couldn't keep pretending to be someone he wasn't. "Ethan, please," Clara whispered again, her voice barely audible. Her eyes flicked to the tablet, and he saw it fear. Yes, but also a flicker of understanding. She knew what he was about to do. Maybe, deep down, she wanted it too. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, loud enough for the microphone to catch. The congregation stirred, confused. James's brow furrowed. Ethan tapped the tablet. The projector hummed to life. A QR code filled the screen, stark and black against the white background. Murmurs rippled through the church as guests pulled out their phones, curious, scanning the code. Ethan's heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst. The first gasp came from the back row. Then another. Phones lit up, screens reflecting the website Ethan had built. James's emails to Michael, Clara's texts to Lena, and a letter Ethan had written himself, confessing his own truth. "I'm gay. I've always been gay. And I can't marry Clara, because neither of us is living honestly." Clara's bouquet slipped from her hands, lilies scattering across the altar. James's face went ashen, his hands gripping the podium. The church erupted in whispers, then shouts, as the truth spread like wildfire. The church was a powder keg, and Ethan had just lit the fuse. The QR code glowed on the projector screen, a silent accusation that had turned whispers into a roar. Clara's lilies lay scattered at her feet, her face frozen in a mix of shock and something else, relief. Maybe, buried deep beneath the panic. "Ethan, what have you done?" James's voice cut through the chaos, low and trembling with fury. He stepped forward, his eyes darting to the screen, then back to his son. The congregation was a sea of glowing phones, each one displaying the website Ethan had built. Some guests looked horrified, others confused, a few even sympathetic. Mrs. Delaney, the town librarian, was already crying, her phone clutched to her chest. Ethan's knees shook, but he stood his ground. "I'm done lying, Dad," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "We all are." Clara reached for his arm, her touch hesitant. "Ethan," her voice broke, and he saw tears welling in her eyes. But she didn't pull away. She didn't run. She just stood there, caught between the life she'd planned and the truth now spilling out for all to see. The website was simple but devastating. At the top, Ethan's letter laid bare his truth, his years of hiding, his love for men, his decision to call off the wedding. Below it were James's emails to Michael, each one a window into a love he'd buried to save his reputation. And then Clara's texts to Lena, tender and yearning, proof that her heart had never fully belonged to Ethan. He hadn't wanted to hurt her, but he couldn't let her marry him under a lie. Not anymore. "Turn it off," James hissed, striding toward the projector, But it was too late. The truth was out, spreading from phone to phone like a virus. A woman in the third row, Clara's aunt, maybe stood up, her face red. "Is this true, James? You wrote those letters?" Her voice carried, and others joined in, demanding answers. James froze, his hand on the projector's power cord. For the first time in Ethan's memory, his father looked small, his broad shoulders hunched under the weight of exposure. "This is a private matter," James said, his voice straining to maintain authority. A misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." Ethan snapped, his anger breaking through. "You loved him, Dad. You loved Michael, and you let him go because you were too afraid to be honest. You preached against people like me, like Clara, while you were hiding the same truth." The church went quiet, the weight of Ethan's words sinking in. James's face crumpled, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw guilt flicker in his father's eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a steely resolve. "You don't know what you're talking about," James said, his voice cold. "You've humiliated this family." "No," Ethan said, turning to face the congregation. "I've humiliated myself for too long. I'm gay. I've always been gay. And I can't marry Clara, because I don't love her the way she deserves. She doesn't love me that way either." Clara let out a sob, covering her mouth. Ethan wanted to reach for her, to tell her he was sorry, but he couldn't move. The truth was out, and there was no taking it back. "Clara, is this true?" Her mother called from the front row, her voice sharp with betrayal. Clara's shoulders shook, but she didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Ethan, her eyes searching his for something: forgiveness, maybe, or strength. "I'm sorry," she whispered, so softly only he could hear. Then, louder, to the crowd, "It's true. I've been in love with someone else. A woman. And I thought I could hide it, but I can't." The church exploded again, voices overlapping in a cacophony of shock, anger, and confusion. Ethan's heart ached for Clara, but he also felt a strange pride. She'd said it. She'd claimed her truth, even if it cost her everything. James grabbed Ethan's arm, his grip bruising. "You've destroyed us," he growled, his face inches from Ethan's. "You think this makes you brave? You're a coward." Ethan yanked his arm free. "No, Dad. I was a coward when I agreed to this wedding. I'm done being afraid." He turned to Clara, who was wiping tears from her cheeks. "We don't have to do this anymore," he said softly. "We can be who we are." Clara nodded, her lips trembling into a small, broken smile. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a weight lift. It wasn't freedom, not yet, but it was a start. The congregation was still buzzing, some guests leaving in a huff, others staying glued to their phones. Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Willow Creek would talk about this for years. There'd be fallout, gossip, rejection, maybe even threats. But as he looked at Clara, and then at the QR code still glowing on the screen, he knew he'd made the right choice. The church doors slammed as a handful of guests stormed out, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence that followed Clara's confession. Ethan stood rooted at the altar, his tablet now dark in his hands. The QR code's work done. Clara's hand found his, her fingers cold but steady, and for a moment, they were the only two people in the world. James was still by the projector, his face a mask of rage and shame. He hadn't spoken since Ethan's outburst, but his silence was louder than any sermon. The congregation watched, some with pity, others with judgment. Ethan could feel their eyes, but he didn't care. Not anymore. "We need to talk," Clara whispered, tugging him toward the side door that led to the church's small garden. Ethan followed, ignoring James's glare and the murmurs swelling behind them. The air outside was crisp, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the rose beds. Clara sank onto a stone bench, her wedding dress pooling around her like a fallen cloud. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to do that?" she asked, her voice raw. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying anymore. "You could have warned me, Ethan." "I wanted to," he said, sitting beside her. "But I wasn't sure I'd go through with it until I was standing there. I couldn't marry you, Clara. Not knowing what I know. Not knowing who we both are." She nodded, staring at her hands. "I saw the text you put up. The ones to Lena." Her voice caught on the name. "How did you even find those?" Ethan winced. "Your phone. I was setting up the playlist, and they popped up. I didn't mean to pry, but they were there. And they were honest." Clara laughed, a bitter sound. "Honest? That's more than I've been." She looked at him, her eyes softening. "I've loved Lena since college. We were together for a year, but I ended it when I came back to Willow Creek. I thought I could be normal, whatever that means." "You don't have to be anything you're not," Ethan said. "Not anymore." She shook her head. "It's not that simple. This town, my familia'll never accept it. And your dad," she trailed off, glancing back toward the church. "Those emails. I had no idea." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted. "I found them by accident. All those years he preached against us, and he was hiding the same thing. He loved Michael, Clara. He still does, I think." Clara's eyes widened. "You think he's still in touch with him?" "I don't know. But I saw them together last year, at the fundraiser. Michael came to see him, and Dad brushed him off. It was like he was terrified of being seen with him." Clara leaned back, her hands twisting in her lap. "What happens now?" "The whole town knows. My mom's probably disowning me as we speak." Ethan took a deep breath. "We face it. Together, if you want. Or we leave. Start over somewhere else. Somewhere we can be ourselves." She looked at him, a faint smile breaking through. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he said. "But it's worth it." Their conversation was cut short by the creak of the garden gate. James stood there, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his face haggard. "You two think you can just walk away from this?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've ruined everything." Ethan stood, placing himself between James and Clara. "No, Dad. You did that. You lied to everyone, Mom. The church. Me. You made me think I was broken, when you were just as scared as I was." James's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "You had no right to air my private life. And you had no right to make me hate myself." Ethan shot back. "You don't get to play the victim here." Clara stood, her voice steady. "James, I'm done pretending too. I'm not marrying Ethan. I'm not going to live a lie just to make you or this town happy." James's eyes flickered with something regret, maybe, or fear. But he turned and walked back into the church without another word. Ethan watched him go, a strange mix of anger and pity twisting in his chest. "We should go back in," Clara said, her voice small but resolute. "Face them." Ethan nodded. Hand in hand, they stepped back into the church, ready to meet the fallout of their truth. The church was a battlefield of whispers and glares as Ethan and Clara stepped back inside. The projector was off now, the QR code gone, but its damage lingered in the air. Ethan's mother, Helen, stood at the front, her face pale and drawn, clutching a crumpled tissue. She hadn't spoken since the chaos erupted, but her eyes locked onto Ethan's, pleading for an explanation he wasn't sure he could give. Clara's mother, Diane, was less restrained. She marched toward them, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "Clara Marie, how could you?" she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "And you," she turned to Ethan, "you've made a mockery of this family." Clara flinched but held her ground. "Mom, I'm sorry you found out this way. But I'm not sorry for being honest. I can't live a lie anymore." Diane's face reddened, but before she could respond, Helen stepped forward, her voice soft but firm. "Enough, Diane. Let's hear them out." She looked at Ethan, her eyes brimming with tears. "Is it true, Ethan? All of it?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, Mom. I'm gay. I've known since I was a kid. And I couldn't marry Clara. Not when I knew the truth about her too. Or about Dad." Helen's gaze shifted to James, who stood alone by the altar, his hands clenched at his sides. "James," she said, her voice breaking. "Those emails. Michael, is it true?" The congregation held its breath. James's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, Ethan saw his father's armor crack. "Helen, he stopped, his voice hoarse. "It was a long time ago. I made a choice." "A choice?" Helen's voice rose, trembling with betrayal. "You chose to lie to me. To our son. To this entire town." James looked away, unable to meet her eyes. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft sob of a guest in the back. Ethan's heart ached for his mother, but he also felt a strange relief. The truth was out, no matter how much it hurt. Clara stepped forward, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Mrs. Parker, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But I love Lena. I always have. And marrying Ethan would have been a leap for both of us." Helen nodded slowly, her eyes still on James. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She turned and walked out of the church, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Diane grabbed Clara's arm. "We're leaving. Now." But Clara pulled free, her jaw set. "No, Mom. I'm staying. I need to face this." Diane stared at her daughter, then turned and stormed out, leaving Clara trembling but resolute. Ethan reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. They'd lost so much in a single moment, but they'd gained something too, the freedom to be themselves. The congregation was thinning now, some guests slipping out quietly, others lingering to whisper or stare. Ethan caught sight of Mrs. Delaney, the librarian, still seated, her eyes soft with understanding. She gave him a small nod, as if to say she was proud. It was a small gesture, but it gave him strength. "We need to talk to Dad," Ethan said to Clara, his voice low. "He can't run from this." They found James in the vestry, staring out a small window at the garden beyond. He didn't turn when they entered, but his shoulders tensed. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice hollow. "The truth," Ethan said. "You owe us that much." James turned, his face etched with exhaustion. "You think you've won something today? You've torn this family apart." "No," Clara said, stepping forward. "You did that when you decided to hide who you were. You made Ethan feel like he was wrong for being himself. You made me think I had to marry him to be accepted. James's eyes flickered with guilt, but he didn't respond. Ethan took a deep breath. Dad, I saw you with Michael last year. I know you still care about him. Why did you let him go? Why did you let this town dictate your life? James's jaw tightened, but his voice was soft when he spoke. Because I was afraid. I thought I could be the man everyone needed me to be. And were you happy? Ethan asked. James didn't answer. He didn't need to. The pain in his eyes said enough. The vestry was suffocating, the air thick with unspoken truths. James's silence hung between them, a confession in itself. Ethan wanted to shake him, to demand more, but the exhaustion in his father's eyes stopped him. For the first time, James wasn't the unyielding pastor or the stern father, was just a man, broken by his own choices. Clara broke the silence. We're not here to punish you, James. We just want to be free. All of us. Her voice was steady, but Ethan could hear the tremor beneath it. She was as scared as he was, but she wasn't backing down. James looked at her, then at Ethan, his expression unreadable. Free, he repeated, the word heavy with irony. You think this is freedom? You've just made yourselves outcasts. Maybe, Ethan said. But I'd rather be an outcast than live a lie. You taught me that truth matters, Dad. Even when it hurts. James flinched, his hands clenching into fists. You don't understand what it was like. Back then, I had no choice. The church, the town, they would have destroyed me. And what about Mom? Ethan asked, his voice sharp. What about me? You let us believe in a man who didn't exist. You let me grow up thinking I was wrong for who I am. James's face crumpled, and he sank into a chair, his hands covering his face. I thought I was protecting you, he whispered. Both of you. Clara knelt beside him, her wedding dress brushing the floor. You can't protect someone by making them hide. I tried, James. I tried to be the daughter everyone wanted. But I can't do it anymore. Ethan watched them, his heart torn between anger and pity. He'd spent years resenting his father, but now, seeing him like this, he felt something else: grief for the life James had denied himself, and for the family they might have been if he'd been honest. I need to find Mom, Ethan said finally. She deserves to hear this from us, not the town gossip. Clara nodded, standing. I'll come with you. They left James in the vestry, his head still in his hands. Outside, the church was nearly empty. The remaining guests huddled in small groups, whispering. Ethan caught snippets of their conversations, words like scandal and shame, but he pushed past them, Clara at his side. They found Helen in the parking lot, sitting in her car with the door open, staring blankly at the dashboard. Ethan approached slowly, his heart pounding. Mom. She looked up, her face streaked with tears. Why didn't you tell me? She asked, her voice barely audible. All these years. Ethan. Why didn't you trust me? Ethan knelt beside the car, his throat tight. I was scared. I thought you'd hate me. Helen reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. You're my son. I could never hate you. She looked at Clara, her expression softening. And you, Clara. You're like a daughter to me. I wish you'd both told me the truth. Clara's eyes filled with tears. We didn't know how. We were afraid of losing you. Helen pulled them both into a hug, her arms trembling but warm. You haven't lost me, she said. But I need time. All of this, it's a lot. Ethan nodded, his own tears falling. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry." They sat there for a long time, the three of them in the quiet parking lot, the weight of the day settling around them. Ethan knew this wasn't the end. There'd be more questions, more pain, more fights to come. But for the first time, he felt like he could breathe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face lighting up. "It's Lena," she whispered. She saw the news. "She's coming to Willow Creek." Ethan smiled, a real smile this time. "Good. You deserve to be happy." "So do you," Clara said, squeezing his hand. "What's next for you?" Ethan looked back at the church, where James was still inside, grappling with his own truth. "I don't know," he said, "but I'm ready to find out." The next morning, Willow Creek was a town transformed. News of the wedding's collapse had spread like wildfire, fueled by screenshots of the QR code's website. Ethan woke to a flood of notifications texts from old friends, some supportive, others cruel. He ignored them, focusing instead on the quiet resolve that had settled in his chest. Today, he'd start rebuilding. Clara was already at the diner when he arrived, sitting in their usual booth with a coffee and a weary smile. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked as he slid in across from her. "Not a chance," Ethan said, ordering a black coffee. "How's Lena?" "On her way," Clara said, her face softening. "She'll be here by noon." "I'm terrified, but excited too." Ethan nodded. "You should be. She's lucky to have you." Clara reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "And you're stuck with me. You know. Best friends don't get to quit." He laughed, the sound easing the tension in his shoulders. "Deal." Their conversation paused as the waitress, a girl Ethan vaguely remembered from high school, refilled their coffees with a curious glance. The diner was quieter than usual, but Ethan could feel the eyes on them, the whispers behind menus. Willow Creek wasn't ready to let this go. "Have you talked to your mom?" Clara asked. "Yeah," Ethan said. "She called last night. She's staying with her sister for a few days, trying to process everything. She didn't say much about Dad." Clara's expression darkened. "What about him? Have you heard from him?" Ethan shook his head. "Not since the vestry. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. He's got his own demons to face," Clara said. "Maybe this will force him to." They sat in companionable silence, sipping their coffees as the morning light streamed through the diner's windows. Ethan's thoughts drifted to James, to the emails he'd read over and over, trying to understand the man behind them. He wondered if Michael was out there somewhere, hearing about the scandal, wondering what might have been. By noon, Lena arrived. Ethan watched from the diner's window as Clara ran to meet her, their embrace fierce and unapologetic. Lena was shorter than he'd imagined, with curly black hair and a quiet confidence that seemed to ground Clara instantly. They came inside, hand in hand, and Ethan felt a pang of hope. This was what freedom looked like. "Ethan, this is Lena," Clara said, her voice bright with nervous energy. Lena extended a hand, her smile warm. "I've heard a lot about you," Lena said. "Thanks for giving Clara the push she needed." Ethan shook her hand, his throat tight. "She did the same for me." They talked for hours, the diner emptying and filling around them. Lena told stories of her life in Philadelphia, where she worked as a graphic designer and lived openly as herself. Ethan listened, imagining a life where he didn't have to hide, where he could love without fear. It felt possible now, in a way it never had before. As the afternoon wore on, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the church. 3 p.m. Michael. His heart skipped. He showed the text to Clara and Lena, who exchanged a look. You have to go, Clara said. This is bigger than just you now. At 3, Ethan stood outside street. Mary's, the church looming like a ghost of yesterday's chaos. Michael was already there, leaning against a tree, his face lined but kind. He looked like someone who'd carried his own secrets for too long. Ethan, Michael said, his voice warm. I saw what you did. It took guts. I didn't do it to hurt him, Ethan said quickly. I couldn't keep lying. I know, Michael said. I left Willow Creek because I couldn't either. But James, he chose differently. They talked for nearly an hour, Michael sharing pieces of his past with James' moments of joy, stolen in secret, and the pain of letting go. Ethan listened, piecing together the man his father had been, and the man he might still become. The sun was setting over Willow Creek as Ethan left the church, Michael's words echoing in his mind. He loved me, but he loved this town more. Don't make the same mistake. Ethan wasn't sure what came next, but he knew he couldn't stay here not forever. Not like this. Back at the diner, Clara and Lena were still there, sharing a slice of pie and laughing over something Ethan couldn't hear. He watched them for a moment, his heart full. Clara had found her way, and now it was his turn. He drove to his parents' house, the place he'd grown up hiding who he was. Helen was back, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, her face tired but calm. You're here, she said, setting the cup down. I wasn't sure you'd come. I needed to see you, Ethan said, sitting beside her. I'm sorry for how this happened. I didn't want to hurt you. Helen took his hand, her grip warm and steady. I'm not hurt because you're gay, Ethan. I'm hurt because you felt you couldn't tell me. But I'm proud of you. You did something I never had the courage to do. You told the truth. Ethan's eyes stung. What about Dad? Helen sighed. He's struggling. But he's talking to me. Really talking. For the first time in years. I think he's starting to see what he's lost. Ethan nodded, hope flickering in his chest. I met Michael today. He's kind. He still cares about Dad. Helen's eyes softened. I know. James told me about him last night. It's a lot to take in, but we'll figure it out. As a family. The word family felt different now, not a cage, but a possibility. Ethan leaned against his mother, the weight of the past week easing just a little. A month later, Ethan stood at the train station, a single suitcase at his feet. Clara and Lena were there, their arms around each other, waving as he boarded the train to Philadelphia. He'd found a job there, a small graphic design firm that didn't care who he loved. It was a start. James hadn't come to see him off, but he'd left a letter in Ethan's mailbox that morning. I'm sorry, it read. I wasn't the father you deserved. But I'm trying to be better. It wasn't everything Ethan wanted, but it was enough for now. As the train pulled away, Ethan looked out the window at Willow Creek fading into the distance. He thought of the QR code, of the chaos it had caused, and the freedom it had bought. He thought of Clara, finally with Lena, and James, maybe finding his way back to Michael. And he thought of himself, stepping into a world where he could finally be whole. The train picked up speed, carrying him toward a new life. Ethan closed his eyes, a smile tugging at his lips. The truth had set him free, just as the carving on the church pew had promised. And for the first time, he believed he could build a life worth living.